everyone, so today I'm going to be filming a tutorial that I was asked about a while ago, about a year ago, when I showed how I paint my handmade doll stands. I never really showed the process of how I make them because I was just kind of starting out on YouTube, and I did say at some point that I would make an official tutorial on how I make doll stands. I plan to do this a lot sooner, but because of the way I make my stands, it involves a lot of stuff outside, and it was winter at the time, and I have a list of priorities for my doll things, so making a doll stand just wasn't really on that priority list. But I got an Alana doll at the flea market pretty recently that needs a stand because she can't sit because of the way her body is made. I don't have a lot of room anymore on display for my handmade doll stands, which is part of why you don't see them as much, but a few years ago I was making them all the time. I have some samples of different doll stands that I've made to show you, and I also have a whole album on Flickr dedicated to my handmade doll stands, and I have a written out tutorial. I'll link my tutorial down below, and you can just check my albums and see the handmade stand one if you want to see different things that I've made. There's a lot of different ways you can make doll stands. I've seen on other channels people with different ideas. My technique might not work for you. It's a little bit more involved, but what I like about it is that you have a lot of freedom with the sizes and the different types of dolls you can use. I've made stands for different Bratz dolls, Disney dolls, we have Bratzillas back here, Barbies, miniature Disney dolls. So there's really no limit. You could even size this up for an American Girl if you could find wire thick enough. That's the thing, is the wire. There's a lot of ways you can tweak this to suit your needs, and you can paint them really plain or you can paint them really fancy. I like my stands to accent my dolls, but not be really overdone, say my earrings or my hair pieces are. And likewise, some of them, if they're my Bratzillas back here, I just paint them plain so that I can change what dolls are on them, instead of needing to make a new stand every time I change my mind about who sits in stands. So I'm going to show you the supplies. So construction wise, you're going to need a few different things. So for me, I like to use baseboard or molding. It's what you see over there, what you put around the trim of a room. My dad actually came up with this technique. So the nice thing about using this is that you can cut them to different sizes, drill into the wood and make the dowel go in so it's removable, but you don't have to. There's an alternative. If you don't have power tools, you can always just get your dowel, and dowel's pretty easy to cut. You can use dog clippers or a really simple handsaw to cut it. You don't need anything fancy, and you just measure it to the size, and you could glue it on. You could buy wooden shapes. So these are some of the doll stands. So these are the wooden shapes I was talking about. When me and my dad first started devising a way to make doll stands, we used wooden shapes, and I bought these at Michael's. They came in either circles or hearts, and there's other shapes too. The only reason why I stopped doing this was, even though it looked really nice, they take up more room on display because you can't push them flush against each other, and also they're kind of expensive, whereas you could buy a piece of baseboard and cut a lot more from it, so it adds up. So if you have a few dolls and you want them to look more decorative, then this is probably the way to go. But if you are like me and you have a lot of dolls and you just want function and cost effectiveness, then the baseboard works better. And you can see that I have a bunch of different sizes here. So this is my standard size. This is for a smaller doll, a Tycho Ariel, a Stacy size doll. This is my Monster High stand size. And I also use this size for my Bratzillas. I don't really like this sized stand a whole lot because it's a little bit too lightweight. It doesn't hold the dolls in place. So if I was going to make Monster High stands again, I would go with this size. And then this is for my little tiny mini Disney dolls. So like I said, you can kind of pick what you want. I drill all of the holes in my stand so I can twist this out and then store it separately, but because if you glue it, obviously you'd have to store it this way. I have all of my measurements on my Flickr for the different types of stands that I like to use, and the heights of the dowel, but you can do that to preference. You can make them bigger or smaller, or use thinner or thicker dowel. I use 1/4 inch dowel, and I buy this at Walmart. I don't have much left. So this even works on the mini Disney dolls. My dad used to use thinner dowel, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't take up that much room. So for the wire itself, there's a lot of different types of wire you can use, and I've put a lot of thought into wire. These are aluminum tie wires. I get these at Home Depot in the fencing section, and I think they're like a few dollars for 30 pieces. And this standard size usually works for about one regular guy doll or girl doll. Obviously, if you were going to use it for like American Girl, or you didn't want to waste a lot, it would be better to have like a spool of wire. I just haven't found any that I really like. I'm like super particular about the type of wire I use. But you could use like different types of florist wire, or just crafting wire. If you're gonna be like cutting the wood, you'll want something to measure with. I like this angle square thing, this, I don't know what it's actually called, because it gives you a nice like straight perpendicular line. And you'll obviously need a measuring tape, you'll need wire cutters and something to bend them with, like pliers, and obviously a pencil. And that's pretty much all you need for the construction. Obviously, if you were gonna glue, you would want some kind of like wood glue or really strong adhering glue, and you wouldn't need a saw or anything. I also use a saw and a sander and a drill press, but you could use a regular drill if you wanted. And then for the decoration, which is the fun part, which makes them look pretty, there's a lot of different things you can use, but you'll need like paint brushes, something for the water, different kinds of paint, and obviously you'll want something to mix the paints on. And then these are the different types of sealers I use. This is really important. If you're gonna make stands, I really recommend getting some kind of sealer. The reason for that is obviously paint can rub off, and you don't want it rubbing off on your doll's clothes, and obviously like you'll want to dust the stands here and there. So if you don't seal them, what's going to end up happening is the paint will come off, and I just honestly think it makes it look that much more professional. Like it really brings out the colors and stuff on the stands. I have used Mod Podge for a long time, and usually after I make my base coat of the plain color, I will use a bit of the clear, so that way when I go to like paint my lettering on, if I make a mistake, I can just wipe it off and not worry about the underlayer coming up with it. But you'll definitely want some kind of like glossy finish, because that makes it look so much nicer. So I use either Mod Podge or this spray paint clear enamel, which actually one of my friends from Flickr said I should try out, and I really liked it on my American Girl bunk bed. So thanks, Cheryl, if you're watching this. These are just the basic decorating supplies. You can use glitter and gems too. I've used those in the past. So I'm gonna measure out the size of the stand I want. I usually cut a few blanks so that I don't run into this problem again. I don't have to like cut every time I want to make a stand. So for my average size of stand, I like it to be 3 inches for like your regular Barbie sized doll. So I'm going to make a mark at the 3 inches, then 6. And then I'm just going to get my like little angle thing here, forget the name of it.
T-square?
No. Usually I like to use unprimed baseboard, because acrylic paints don't stick super well to this primer, so I end up having to sand a lot of it off, and that just makes more work. But this is left over from when me and my dad redid my bedroom like almost 10 years ago now, and I like to use up stuff and recycle. But when I buy this kind of stuff, usually I go to the Home Depot like scrap bin, and I buy like just the scraps of baseboard, because I don't need really huge long pieces, and sometimes they'll give them to me for free if they're small enough scraps.
And it's easier because we drive a little Jeep. It's a lot easier for us to have all those short pieces instead of...
Exactly, because I can't fit really long pieces in my Jeep. I mean, if you're spray painting or you're using like regular like interior house paint, it's not a big deal, but you have to map out where you're going to drill, if you're going to drill. And even if you're going to glue, you'll want to map it out so it's nice and centered. So what you want to do is you want to find the center of your stand. So that's 1.5 inches for this size. And then I go 1/2 inch down. And then I make a little like X, because that's where I'm going to drill. So that way it's not like right at the end of the stand, so there's plenty of room for the dowel to go in, but it's not like in the dead center of the stand, because obviously you want room for their like, you know, dresses to flop around. So that's what it should look like. You probably don't want to draw super heavy on your wood. You want to make your lines pretty light, because sometimes depending on the type of paint you use, it won't fully cover it up. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to have to sand a lot of this off anyways. So Now I'm going to take this to my saw and I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to drill holes. I'll show you my setup, but I'm not going to have my camera on for it. So this is my setup on the addition of my house. It's just like an unfinished sunroom, so there's just a lot of crap out here. But this is my drill press. My dad got it at the flea market, and it just makes my life easier instead of holding like the hand drill. And then there's obviously the chop saw, which just makes one quick motion. And then I have like my sandpaper and all of my like tools down there. So I didn't want to show you guys me sawing because it's really loud and I didn't want it to hurt the mic on my camera or blow dust everywhere, but I can show you how I use the drill press. I really like this, and I like to drill all the way through. And there you have it. It was that easy. It makes it so much easier having a drill press, and it's not like a super scary machine to use. And like I said, my dad got this at the flea market just for making doll stands like 6 years ago, and I want to say it was like $25 or like $40. It wasn't bad, and it even came with the stand. So now I'm gonna sand some of this off. So even if you get the unprimed stuff, you'll probably want to sand the sides of the wood just to make sure that it's nice and smooth, so that the paint goes on the best. And the sharper your saw is, and the finer the teeth, the less you're gonna have to sand. Also, you can get rid of any like bumps and imperfections in your wood. And the nice thing about using wood is that you can recycle these stands. I've painted old stands over again if I say didn't like the way they turned out, or maybe I wanted to use them for a different doll. You can sand off all of the paint and start brand new, so it doesn't have to go to waste. And obviously, like, the wood is biodegradable, so it's not going to hurt the environment if you threw it out. And I like to do this all out here because it's messy. And I mean, I try to keep out here pretty clean, but obviously this room's not even finished. The next step after you've cut or sanded, drilled, even if it's like a piece of wood that you bought pre-cut at Michael's, you always want to take a damp cloth just to get off any kind of dust or debris, because that's going to affect how your paint adheres. So you can see that I sanded this stand so it no longer has any of the primer. It's a lot of work because my mechanical sander doesn't work anymore. I don't know what's wrong with it. So it takes a while to get it all off, but you want to make sure it's off pretty evenly because it'll make the paint patchy. So it's worth the extra effort. So I'm just leaving these ones plain for now because I don't know when I'm going to use them or who I'm going to use them for. I also wanted to show you guys really quick, I have a stockpile of these little mini stands too that I made a while ago, and you can see that they were sanded down too. Sometimes I'll sand them all down ahead of time, but for the sake of this video I only did the one. So then the next part would be the backrest. I pretty much already pre-cut this dowel a while ago. You can see how it works where you twist it in and you twist it out. So the way that I figure out how tall I want it is I'll put the doll on the stand and then take my big piece of dowel and see where it falls. Sometimes the arc of the doll's back or like maybe a certain feature can get in the way, but generally speaking I would say 8 3/4 inches is how length I like to have a backrest on my like Barbie size dolls, and then I like to do 9 inches for a guy doll, and that's because I like it to extend a little bit past the waist because it adds extra support, and that's one of the reasons why I like making my own stands instead of using like the plastic Monster High stands or Barbie stands, is because A, the plastic is really lightweight, so if like the floor were to shake, there's nothing to weight it down, and B, a lot of the waist pieces on the stands are like, it stops right at the waist, and then the doll has like all of that top weight that can cause her to topple over. And some stands don't even have a waist piece. They're the kind that you put between the doll's legs, and those are really awful. It's like a balancing act. We would just measure it, and then like I usually cut it with a little handsaw. I don't like to use the chop saw for that because it tends to fling the little pieces of dowel, and one time a piece of dowel got up behind the blade and my uncle had to help me fix it. So I would just recommend cutting it by hand and then just like sanding the raw part where you cut. Most dowel has like sticker on it. I don't know if you can see here, but there's some sticker. You want to make sure that all that sticker and adhesive is off because it'll make your paint job look really messy. This is my favorite part about making doll stands, is decorating. And obviously, don't worry, the waist piece comes after. The reason for that is because if you were to put the waist piece on, you'd get paint on the waist piece, and then if you wanted to adjust it up or down later, you would see like the bald spots of the wood where you hadn't painted. I like to paint it assembled too because I can use the dowel to kind of like turn this and paint it. I have a whole video on me painting doll stands that's from about a year ago. I have like a lot of info in there too. I'll put it in the description. I'll show some again. So I have my sketchbook here. This is my retired sketchbook, and these are like probably 6-year-old designs that I had. Like most of this sketchbook was me planning out lettering. I have like a really methodical way of making doll stands. I really like to like have a certain font that I base on the movie font, and then I'll pick like a color usually for the font. But like I don't always stick to that because I have so many dolls. I like to have a doll near me so I can kind of plan it out. And I really like the woody grain that comes through the paint. Like that's just a personal preference, especially like for one of my Eric dolls. I did like a ship themed stand, so it looks like he's on a deck of a ship, and I really liked how the wood grain came through, so I only did one coat of paint. And you could of course like take this off if you wanted, but I've made so many stands that I don't really map anything out anymore in pencil. And the important thing is to let each coat of paint dry thoroughly. So if you're keeping the stand primed, say you bought the primed kind of baseboard, you would definitely want to let the stand dry thoroughly between each coat, because when you go to paint again, it'll like rip off your previous layer. And so I'm still waiting to paint more coats onto the purple part. I noticed that certain colors of paint need more layers to build up. It might depend on the brand or the sort of color. For me, it's always purples. Wanted to do a glittery coat over my teal color and probably my pink color. So just a heads up, if you want to use like these acrylic paints with the glitter in them, if you use these on their own, they'll be very, very opaque and you'll probably see the underneath layer. So if say it was primed, you'll see the white, or if it was wood grain, then you'll see the wood grain. What I like to do is you can either mix some regular paint in with it, or you can paint like a base coat and then once that's dry, go over it, which I find that works the best. I like the effect it has the best. So I've painted my base coat here. It took me like 5 or 6 layers of the purple to get it to build up right, and then I added a coat of that glittery paint, you can kind of see. So because it was so time consuming to do that, I am going to use this clear sealer, which is also good for like any kind of things they do with chalk pastels. So I always have this handy. So I'm going to spray this down really quick, just because if I make a mistake on the lettering or I change my mind, it'll wipe off easier and it won't take up all the paint I worked hard for.
My first time as cameraman.
And you want to make sure that your nozzle is clear because you don't want clumps of it getting all over. So I'm just going to spray the very front bit of it because I'm not going to be touching the back paint anyways. So I finished painting the details on this stand, and now I'm going to spray it down with the gloss finish. And this time I'm going to get all around the stand. Okay, and now is the time for the final step. Usually I like to let the gloss sealer sit for several hours, like 5 or 6. There's always directions, but I find that the sooner I try to put the doll on the stand, the more likely it is to be tacky. So I have my piece of fence tie wire where I want it, so I like it to be usually right around the waist. Now you could use a pencil to mark this, but I don't need to. So you're going to get your wire like this, and this is the hard part. This is what took me a lot of effort. You're going to literally like wrap the wire around, and if you leave any like gap, if you don't wrap it tight enough, it's going to move up and down. It's not a big deal because you can glue it in place, and even if it does move up and down, it's still going to hold your doll decently. Twist it. Since this side is bent and this side is not, I like to make sure that there's a little bit of extra here because I'm going to turn it in like a regular stand. So I'm going to take one side and I'm going to wrap it around. I make one revolution, and then I'm going to make a second revolution. Sorry if that wasn't in frame. And you can see how these coils are all like really close to each other. And that's what you want. If there was space over here, you'd want to like squinch it. Is take my pliers and I like to fold this back because you want to keep it tucked. And then I usually trim off some of the excess. And then you're going to clamp this down. That's the most important part. You don't want that wire poking. And then I use the side of my pliers, not the part with the teeth because I don't want the teeth to leave imprints. And then I kind of bend it into a waist shape. And there you have it. She's in there pretty good. And it holds her in pretty decently. So it's really dark out, so sorry about the yellow lighting. But this is what the stand looks like. You can see that like shininess is glitter. I think it looks really cool. And I did it all the way around, and then I really think that the gloss sealer makes everything look better because I honestly wasn't so sure how I felt about this stand and was actually contemplating wiping it all off and starting again. But after sealing it, I feel like it brings out all of, like the subtle tones, like the little shine spots I did in the lettering. Lana says she likes her new stand, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this technique. There, like I said, are a lot of other ways that you can make doll stands. There isn't just one technique. You have to think about like what works for your budget and the size of your collection. I couldn't afford to have plastic stands for all my dolls, and I like these so much because it gives a personal touch to my dolls. And I also want to say that this is a really special tutorial because my dad came up with the idea for these. He was the one who said we needed to come up with handmade doll stands because we just couldn't keep buying wire stands for them all the time. So this is kind of like me sharing a piece of him with you guys, and they've come a long way since me and him first made doll stands. Originally we didn't have the dowel, so it was removable, and we didn't have like a set waist piece. I used to use like little twisty ties, and I didn't used to seal my stands, so they've come a long way and they look a lot better than they used to, and I wish you could see what they looked like now. You know, I think that our two heads together made something really cool.
And Uncle David actually helped with the knowing how to do that.
Yeah, because I came up with the idea and he showed me how to attach the wire. So it was kind of like a bit of a family project, which is really special. And some of my last memories with my dad were making doll stands, and I'll show you his favorite stand in a minute. I've redone most of my really old ones because I'm a perfectionist, but I kept one stand I told myself I'd never redo, and I'll show it to you guys. And like I said, if you want to check out any of my pictures of my handmade doll stands, they have an album, and I also have the written out tutorial I'll link below. So these are two of the most special stands in my collection. Oh, hi, Ollie! Because this one right here was the prototype stand. This is my favorite Jasmine doll, and if you ever watched any of my Dolly Tales episodes, this is the sparkling Jasmine doll from my childhood that my mom was still alive when I bought this doll. That's how far we go back. So it's fitting that she has this stand. So my dad was actually the one that painted this, and then I did the lettering on it later. So that's really special. And then this one over here, this was his favorite one. I remember how cool he thought this looked. So he really, really loved the lettering. Like, I could totally do a lot better than this now, and I hate how I can see some of my pencil lines, but because he liked it so much, I vowed to keep this stand as was. And actually, the Sea Pearl Princess Ariel and the fashion pack's moving because Bath Beauty Ariel needs a stand, and I'm running out of room, and she was actually supposed to be the one that was in this tutorial originally, but we're going to pretend that that wasn't the case. You get a very special stand instead. I hope you guys liked seeing those really special stands. I mean, they all kind of tell a story, and a lot of thought was put into each and every stand. And whether you guys choose to make them plain or you choose to make them even like more ornate than the ones I have, I think it's just a really cool way to personalize your dolls. And it means a lot to me. This is my most sentimental kind of craft project that I do for my dolls. So until next time, love your dolls, love yourself, and love your life.